Welcome everyone to our panel discussions focused on women in STEM. So we are very privileged to have invited our colleagues and our faculty here today to join us, as well as several student representatives. So first, we're just gonna introduce ourselves quickly. So my name is Xuan Wang-Wolf, and I'm the Director of Online Education here at Emory Henry, and my co-organizer, Maggie.
Hello, I'm Maggie Obermann, and I'm the Civic Engagement Coordinator with the Appalachian Center for Civic Life. Thank you all so much for being here. It's great to see everyone. I am not a STEM representative. However, I have made a connection with a group that you're going to hear about later in the community.
So professors, do you have a preference? So I'm just gonna follow the order on my screen. Dr. Carroll?
Hi, I'm Dr. Carroll. I teach here in the math department. Do you want a bigger introduction than that, or?
Up to you.
I've been at Emory Henry since 2012. I got my PhD at Georgia Tech and a master's degree at University of Nebraska in Lincoln.
And then Rachael?
All right, I'm Rachael Wilbur. I am in the marketing and communications department here at Emory Henry College. I am the web content manager and chief photographer. I do video work too. I'm originally from just outside of St. Louis. I introduced people earlier to my dog Finn, who was on my cup. So you can enjoy me and my dog while we talk today.
Welcome, Finn. And Dr. Fleet?
So I'm Dr. Fleet. I am a professor in the biology department. I've been at Emory Henry almost 15 years now. That's weird to think about. Let's see. So I earned my bachelor's degree at Tufts University, which is outside of Boston, and then my PhD at Duke University. And I'm excited to be here. It's really exciting to see all of the Women's History events this month. So I am grateful to the organizing committee.
And Dr. Ferguson?
My name's Jamie Ferguson. I'm originally from North Alabama, and I am a chemistry professor here. I have been at Emory Henry since 2014. My chemistry area is called ionic liquids, which is, if you imagine that a flowing liquid made of all pluses and minuses, instead of like table salt, which is a nice crystalline solid. So that's what I am kind of interested in. I did my PhD at the Queen's University of Belfast in Northern Ireland, and spent my postdoc at the University of Ottawa in Canada.
Thank you, all panelists. Now let's introduce our student representatives. Hannah?
Yeah, hi, I'm Hannah Reid. I'm a junior here, and I'm a math major.
And Elizabeth?
Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Combs. I'm from Carroll County, Virginia. I'm a third year at Emory Henry, and I'm a biology psychology double major.
Thank you all. So just getting us started with, what is STEM? So it stands for, most of you probably know, just in case you don't, it stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we prepared several questions that we would like to ask our panelists. So I'm gonna ask the first question. So tell us your story of your earliest interest in STEM related learning, and tell us why did you choose STEM as your major of study or career of choice?
If we want to keep to the same order, I can start.
Sure.
I started tutoring other kids in math when I was probably in about 7th grade. It just kind of happened organically. I would tutor a couple people and they would recommend me to other people. So I started teaching math to other kids pretty young. but I didn't think that it was what I was going to do. I went through high school. I went to a public school in New Jersey, but it had a very innovative curriculum. One of the rules was that you had to read books in every single class. So I was reading books in my math classes. So I got to read some really interesting books that way. My freshman year in high school, I read a book that was essentially how to build all of the number systems in the world, starting with the number 1. And it was really fascinating. And I think that that experience actually kind of laid the groundwork for me to take higher math, though I didn't know it at the time. I actually left high school after my junior year and went to college. That's a long story. You can catch that story some other time if you're interested. But when I got to college, I felt like I should take calculus because I had this idea that, you know, a well-rounded, educated person should know calculus. I'm not sure where I got that idea. My family isn't particularly mathy or sciencey, but I had this strong belief. And when I was in calculus the first semester of my freshman year, I sat next to my future husband, first of all. So that was an interesting aspect of calculus. And then the professor I was taking it with said, "Hey, I'm teaching this really cool class next semester. I know you like writing, and it's a mathematical writing class. You should totally take it." What she didn't tell me was that it was a mathematical proofwriting class that the math majors were a little scared of. So I ended up taking this class as a freshman. Most of the math majors in there were juniors. But the kind of cool thing is, I said to several of my freshman friends, "Hey, I'm taking this really cool math class next semester. You should join me." So there were 5 freshmen in the class, and we kind of came in as a unit. We were already good friends. And it was hard. I tried to quit the class several times, and my professor wouldn't let me. But I got through it. It had this really steep learning curve, which I just wasn't used to. And after that, I was a math major. Interestingly enough, all 5 of the freshmen who took that class with me now have PhDs. We don't all have PhDs in math. In fact, I'm the only mathematician. But among our group, we have a philosopher, a computer scientist, a physicist, actually 2 physicists, and me. So it's kind of my story there.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll. That's a very interesting story and background. Can we ask another panelist to share?
So I'll go ahead and share kind of like my background, because I feel like I'm a little bit different than most of the other science-based panelists, particularly because I feel like I'm going to put the A in the STEM and go a little STEAM on it, because my background is more in art and digital media. So I feel like it's a little bit of a different path, but I do remember growing up, I never like thought, you know, growing up that I was gonna kind of do what I'm doing now. But I do remember when I was in middle school, grade school, middle school, I think we didn't have like STEM per se, but we had what was called Ideal Lab. And that gave us the opportunity to be more involved with computers. And so we just were allowed the opportunity to continue playing. And I think that's a really good aspect of learning is playing. So we got to just play on the computers and learn about different programs. And from there, I kind of went the art route. So I have a studio art background, and I did a lot of work in, you know, traditional studio media. But I think from there, it kind of just morphed into working in digital media. And as we came up with technology, it just kind of morphed more into working in digital media and working in, you know, digital aspect of life. And so I have a different route into STEM via the arts. And I think that the arts can definitely also play into learning about STEM too. So much of it is based on curiosity and learning, and I feel like all of that comes together in STEM, which is a really great thing.
That's awesome. I love the art spin. Dr. Fleet or Dr. Ferguson?
I can jump in. I feel like my colleagues have more mature and sophisticated stories than I do, but here goes. So when I was a kid, maybe second or third grade, there was this movie, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. And for those, some of you are nodding. Okay, so it was my favorite movie of all time. And if you know anything about that story, you know that first of all, E.T. came from outer space, so he had to know something about the stars. And he was a botanist. He was on Earth because he came to collect plants. And I fell in love with the movie. And I decided that when I grew up, I wanted to meet E.T. And so I either needed to be a botanist or an astronomer. And that was it, right? There are no sciencey people in my family. I didn't know what it meant to do those things, but I thought it was cool. So that was the piece of it. And the other piece that helped is that at the time I lived in a really small town in rural Georgia, and my house didn't have air conditioning, but the public library did, and it was within walking distance of my house. So in the summer, the place I wanted to hang out was where it was literally cool with air conditioning. And I read every science book that I could pull off the shelf in the public library, and I read about planets and I read about plants. And I started to learn things, and I still didn't really know what it meant to do science, but I liked what I was learning. And so in high school, then anytime there was a summer enrichment opportunity that my parents would let me go to, I would jump at the chance. And I got to college still liking science and still not really sure what it meant to be a scientist, but I was really lucky to have professors that kind of nudged me in the right directions and said, hey, you can do this, and hey, you should try that thing. And I still like what I'm doing, and I still have a lot to learn, but it's really fun. So here I am.
Wonderful. We never know where, our passion or interests lead us. Dr. Ferguson?
Well, that I don't know why you think that story is not twice as entertaining as any of the last stories you heard, Dr. Fleet, but I certainly can't live up to that. What I do want to say is that I hate is a strong word. I did not like chemistry in high school. It was not a pleasant course for me. It wasn't that I did badly or anything. It was just, it seemed like such a boring course. You had to learn, you had to memorize a bunch of ions, and you had to do things like balance equations, and I didn't understand why, or what exactly. We had a coach as a teacher, and there's nothing wrong with coaches as teachers, but sometimes coaches for teachers of science classes is perhaps not the best idea. And so I came to college not necessarily interested in chemistry. I had a really great math teacher to take us through Calc 2 or so in high school. She was also the teacher of lots of the parents of the students that were in class with me. So she had a long history with the school, and she was also just a really strong teacher. So I did come to college with a good math background. My parents were both in the medical field, and I didn't have strong ideas about what I wanted to do. And so I thought, well, pre-med looks like a great slate of math and science courses. And so that put me in the chemistry department for 4 consecutive semesters. And I realized that I really like that level of resolution, kind of dial in and focus at the molecular level of how stuff works. It just I guess I'm kind of an idealist chemist. I more came at it through the guise of interested in environmental issues, but also coming from a medical background, interested in how medicines interact in a biological system. And so once I sort of saw what chemistry was as a structured discipline of study, I don't know, it is a very cool kind of place to just to kind of focus your attention. And I also like that that in chemistry, it's a cut and dry sort of system. there's not, I mean, there are ways to prove and disprove a lot of things pretty conclusively. So, I think that kind of matches with my personality. I don't know if that's an origin story, but that's kind of how I migrated to chemistry.
Thanks so much for sharing. Very interesting. So how about our student representatives? Elizabeth or Hannah?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Growing up, even like as early as kindergarten, first grade, I just had this desire for knowledge. It didn't necessarily have to be science. It just had to be knowledge. I really just wanted to know everything about everything, read everything. I loved it very, very much. And so that just learning in general gave me a good relationship with academics. And then I have two parents in the medical field. And so I grew up in a hospital setting. I was there a lot, underneath the reception desk coloring or something. But that was very special to me. And I think that's pushed me towards the pre-med route that I'm in, specifically psychiatrics and psychology. I grew up in an area where access to that kind of healthcare was very limited. So when I was, let's say, 11, 12, ages like that, the idea was I have to do this because no one else is doing it in my home and someone has to. But now, as things have gotten significantly better and people are taking action, I still really want to do it. So I think that proves that it's the subject for me.
Thanks for sharing. Hannah?
Yeah, I have always liked math. I've always been really good at it. It's just like it's been my favorite subject ever since I can remember. It wasn't until I came to Emory that I kind of decided to be a math major. It was still kind of up in the air as to like what I wanted to study and what I wanted to do. But then I took my first math class here, and then I realized I want to take more math classes. So after that, I took more, I became a math major, and I'm still not positive on what I'm going to do after, like what specific, field or whatever I'm going to go into. But I just knew that I wanted to study math and I wanted to take more math classes. So it was definitely the subject for me, I think.
Great. For the following questions, so our panelists or students representatives, feel free to jump in. Maggie?
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we wanted to host this for Women's Month is to also talk about women in particular in STEM. And so I'm just going to give you like a few statistics here before I jump into the next question, just to kind of set the stage for that. So STEM occupations account for nearly 7% of all US occupations. In 2019, there were nearly 10.8 million workers in STEM. And one thing to learn about with that is in 1970, women made up 38% of all US workers and 8% of STEM workers. But by 2019, the STEM proportion had increased to 27% of STEM workers, and women made up 48% of all workers. So women have really pushed into the field. Women employed full-time year-round in STEM occupations actually have earned more than their counterparts who are not in STEM. But this is a key piece, only 84.1%, they've earned only 84.1% of what men earn in the fields. So the question that I want to ask the panelists, and we don't have to have everybody necessarily answer, but whoever feels called to answer the question, I'm going to kind of combine these two questions. But knowing that with those statistics, what are the gender stereotypes or the social norms that you can see that are surrounding the STEM field and that have surrounded the STEM field? And how do those social norms or stereotypes potentially affect our economy, our society? And you can even share if there's something that you personally witnessed or experienced with these kind of stereotypes in the STEM field.
There's a lot to think about there. I'll jump in with a couple of ideas. So let's see, some of the sort of gender norms, a couple of the things that I think of, right, are that often in, not always, but in the STEM professions that I've seen the most directly, right, there's often an expectation that you maybe work long hours or non-traditional hours. And that might mean you're out in the field, right, in the jungle, or away from your home, or that it might mean that you're in the lab and around potentially harmful chemicals and things like that. And all of those are settings that make it challenging to raise a family, right? And so when you balance that against this sort of social expectation that says that at least as a US society, we tend to expect women to take on more of the childcare responsibilities. And I think some of that is us putting that expectation on ourselves, right? Those can be challenging things to balance. So I think that's one piece.
I think that there's a stereotype that women who do math are going to or should end up as high school math teachers. And I think that there's this image of, the people who do serious math are, the geeks of the world, the guys with their thick glasses, right? And that's not a true stereotype either. But I think that people don't necessarily get a good idea of what doing math is. People say things to me like, well, we've discovered all the numbers. What else is there to do? So I think, or another common kind of stereotype of math is that that math is very cut and dry. I heard Jamie say this, but 2 + 2 always equals 4. So there's no mystery, there's nothing to explore. But neither of those things are quite right. And I think that not only is there not an image of women doing math, like people in society don't have that broader perspective of what doing math means. So they in particular don't think, well, I could do math. Like I could do some math research. I could find out some math that's never been discovered before. So I think that there have been a lot of efforts to kind of pay attention to the problem, at least. Math is about 30% of math doctorates right now are going to women. So at least actually that's the last time I looked. I should make sure that that's still a true statistic. But I think that it can be really isolating if you're the only woman in your graduate program. And that type of thing happens. I started with several women in my graduate program, but I was the only woman who finished with a PhD at Georgia Tech from the year before me and the year after me. So there were 3 years where I was the only woman who graduated. And if you add to it even further that I was one of the only American women who graduated from the program, it was even more isolating. But I think that type of experience isn't uncommon, and how people deal with that varies.
I definitely agree with that, Dr. Carroll. I was thinking about this, looking at the questions earlier. I immediately thought, and psychology major coming out right now, I immediately thought of Seligman's learned helplessness experiments, and the concept that if, I won't go too far into that, that'd take all night. But basically there were these dogs and they were put in these painful situations, and if they didn't see a way out, they wouldn't try to get out. And I think you can kind of mirror that, and you can say, if you don't see people doing what you want to do, perhaps you won't go after that. Perhaps you won't try to achieve those goals, just because it may seem unrealistic to you just based off of what you're seeing, your reality. Another thing I wanted to add, just general misconceptions. The concept that a woman especially can't be smart and be anything else. It's like, if you're smart, that's your central personality trait. You can't like music. You can't you can't do anything fun. You're smart. I've gotten that one a lot. So I think that's a big one.
I haven't ever heard that phenomenon explained that way. So thanks for sharing that perspective.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. Like most things, representation matters. And so I think that's really a poignant part in STEM and in any field or any place in life, really, like to be able to see yourself in that, like Elizabeth said, like representation absolutely matters, for sure. So that's my tidbit.
I just wanted to jump in there with a statistic that some of you might have heard on a previous Lyceum this semester, related to women in STEM. With representation, there in organic chemistry, we have certain recipes for how to connect two things, two pieces of a molecule together. And when you invent a new one, you get your name put on it. And so this is how we teach organic chemistry, by all these named reactions. And the most famous ones, we make sure we cover, but there are over 600. And someone recently studied all the named reactions looking for women, and they found four. And so this is a the way that it's not like a Nobel Prize. It's something that kind of happens organically within the chemistry community when a method is useful enough. Instead of listing the half a dozen reagents or the 3 reagents that are in that recipe, they just refer to the person's name. But this, so this is kind of a pure organic kind of process. And so, that sort of speaks for the chemistry community, or at least the organic chemistry community kind of itself. So.
Thank you for answering that. And Xuan, you want to answer ask the next question?
Sure. So the next question is, what are the potential pitfalls or roadblocks that women often encounter when pursuing a career in STEM field?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, my internet cut out.
Of course. So what are the potential pitfalls or roadblocks that women often encounter when pursuing a career in STEM field? I think actually, several of our panelists just mentioned, right, the stereotypical concepts of women in STEM, but feel free to share more.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit, and this touches on what Dr. Fleet mentioned a little bit, but for me personally, it hits really hard to home right now because I am a new mom. So definitely juggling and or trying to deal with, not deal with, but learn to be a new person. So being a new mom, being this new entity in a field, and navigate that without trying to sacrifice everything. So you want to be a good mom, and you want to be a good worker. I've always prided myself on, that I'm a very hardworking person, that I'm very dedicated, and I want to do all of the things. But then now your life gets totally kind of changed when you have a baby, and even on a very like cellular level in your brain, like change, like physical changes in your body happen, and balancing that with trying to do all the things that you did before, or like I said, personally I've dealt a lot with kind of that guilt issue, and then currently you want to add on top of that being in a pandemic. So add that all together, and it can be so much, because I spent my whole pregnancy, and my daughter is just now 6.5 months old. We've been in a pandemic this entire time. So realizing how that affects everything.
I'll come back to that issue of representation as well, right? It's, I think for anyone, it can be more challenging when you're, especially when you hit a particularly challenging point in your education, your graduate program, your job search, or whatever, if you don't look around and see people who you sort of identify as role models and who you can relate to. And so, especially in fields where women have historically been underrepresented and are still underrepresented, right? If you look around and you don't see anyone who looks like they're on the path that you want to be on, it can be harder to sort of convince yourself that yes, you can make it, right? And this is what it looks like to get there. And so I think the more that we have diverse representation in any career, but STEM fields included, the more it becomes easier to identify those role models and say, oh, they're doing that, I can do that too, right?
Okay, of course the train is going by now, because it would. This is in the exact same lines, and it starts with a story, but I promise it's going somewhere. So when I was younger, I pretty much lived with my grandmother, and she had approximately 5 foreign films on VHS tape, if we still know what those are. And she would play those, and she would basically have me recite them back in the language, in the accent, but focus on the accent. And when I got older, I asked her, why did we do this, Grandma? And the reason she did that is because she wanted to basically train the Southern accent out of me, because she was concerned that if I had the accent, then I wouldn't be respected. She told me, they're gonna think you're stupid. And for the longest, like, I think that concept, just like being an individual from the South, is very similar to the concept that we're all talking about, being a woman, just something particularly out of your control that you may feel like you have to overcome. Like a lot of my academic experience, I've been like, I have to prove people wrong. I have to surprise people because I'm a woman in science. But I think it's not the surprise that is the benefit there. I think taking away the surprise is the step that we need to go into. Taking away the, oh, wait, you study physics? Are you sure? Are you sure you didn't mean to say psychology? Kind of making fun of myself there. But yeah, I think a big roadblock is just that separation between, the realistic self, the actualized self, and the ideal self. I didn't mean to get so psychological tonight, but I guess that's just where we're going. But I definitely agree with all that was just said.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry. I think, yeah, I agree with that. Kind of going back to what Dr. Carroll was saying earlier, in the math field, one of those stereotypes is like, whenever I tell people I'm a math major, one of their first things is, oh, so you're going to be a teacher, or like, oh, so you want to teach, just something along those lines. And it's like, no, I'm actually wanting to do something more scientific with my math degree. And so, yeah, I think that, like Elizabeth was saying, just trying to turn things away from like shock as to like, oh, you're doing something more scientific, and turning it more into like, oh, okay, tell me more about that, instead of like, just kind of taken aback. So, of course, that's probably going to be like a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but so definitely something to work towards.
I will mention one that I haven't heard anybody talk about yet, that I think it's not just STEM and it's not just women, but I think that it probably is more ubiquitous in STEM, and the imbalance is more toward women. Is after college, you need to expand your breadth of experience. After a PhD, it's good to have a postdoc, or in some fields, you do a master's and then you do a PhD, and then you might work or do a postdoc or something. But there's usually several chapters between when you land somewhere and when you first start your studies, and lots of times you are chasing the ideas, you're chasing the science. If you were in the arts, then you'd be chasing an artistic opportunity. But you end up moving a lot, and that's been really it's been a real net plus to my life, that I've gotten to live so many places. But also it's isolating because you form relationships, and then you move, and you form relationships and you move, and it's a bit disconnected. And if you form personal relationships in that time, if you're with somebody, you have to make a negotiation of, somebody's going to get an opportunity before the other person gets an opportunity. And I can tell you, as a middle 30s female in the sciences, just from personal experience and from all the friends that I know, that the default is the expectation that women will move for men, but not the other way around. And so I'm just throwing that out there as a, kind of, you got to be ready for that. But
I was just gonna tell a story. I was talking.
Whoops, we lost her.
I think, yeah. Oh, it happens. Connections,
will.
right?
Yeah, she'll hop back on, I'm sure. Do you want to go forward, and if she comes back on, she can share her story?
Sure. So the next question is, what are the strategies for STEM female students to network and be successful in their future careers? What kind of advice can you offer?
So I know we're going to talk about this more later, but a few hours ago, we got to talk to the most just a wonderful group of girls, very young. By the way, I was so impressed. I believe the youngest was a 3rd grader. Thinking about STEM, oh my goodness, my heart is just so full. But I think activities like that, where you just simply have a conversation with somebody who might be interested in science and really just answer questions. They were asking the most professional, I wish you all could have been there. Just like having those conversations are so valuable. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's let Dr. Carroll continue. Welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry, my Zoom meeting crashed. So I was talking to Teresa Keller, who retired from here a couple of years ago. She was a mass communications professor, and she did a lot of interviews. She she had a radio show where I think she may still do interviews. Do you know? In any case,
I think
she interviews a lot of people from the community, and she and I were talking about a potential radio show where women in STEM told kind of those bad stories, the things that happen in our careers because of sexism or harassment or all sorts of other things. And she just said to me, I don't think we should tell those stories. I don't want the women who are coming up, who are younger, to hear these stories and think that, oh, I don't want to go be in STEM because these things happen. And I was arguing with her that, no, I think we really do need to tell these stories, because otherwise, if something happens to someone who's studying STEM, they feel really isolated and they think this has never in the history of ever happened to anyone. My life is so strange. But really, a lot of us have interesting stories about our careers and our lives in science and math that we don't tell because they're awkward, right? But for instance, I was applying for a Fulbright to go study in Hungary. And to apply for a Fulbright, you have to have a sponsor. And my sponsor and I had a project we were excited to work on, and we'd already started a paper together. And he said, you need to come to Hungary, come to this graduate student summer school, and my institute's hosting it, and all these things. And I was very excited. He gave me a travel grant to come, and we were going to start working on our application for his sponsorship of me for the Fulbright. And this was all very exciting. And when I got there, I was at an opening reception, and one of the other people who worked at this institute approached me and said, just in case things don't work out, if you don't think that he'd be a good mentor for your project, I'd be willing to sponsor you too. So I thought, that was a little odd. But it turns out that this mathematician who'd invited me to Hungary to start working on this proposal was a very well-known womanizer, and was very well known for trying to seduce young graduate students. And instead of warning me or doing anything else to protect me or head this off, he just offered to sponsor me instead. And the predictable happened, and my the person I thought that I was going to work with turned out to be a pretty big jerk. And we wrote a paper together. I often wonder what people thought I did to write a paper with this very famous mathematician. But I did not apply in the end for a Fulbright. And even though I actually really liked the person who offered to be my backup sponsor, I realized I couldn't go be in a country where I didn't speak the language with someone who was harassing me. I didn't know the legal system there, and it just didn't seem like a situation I wanted to put myself in, even though it would have been a really great opportunity for me. So these are the kind of stories that, again, we don't tend to share them just because, I don't know, they feel kind of awkward, right? Like, I know I didn't do anything wrong, but it's still like, I still think about it, like, and I'm going to go study in Hungary someday, but it might still be a while.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Dr. Carroll. It's sometimes, cases like this or stories like this is really hard to, digest, but, it actually happened, right? And I'm so sorry that it happened to, women scientists or, women professionals in the STEM fields or in some other fields as well. I remember a couple of months ago, I think Dr. Fleet and Dr. Ferguson as well, we're on the panel of our picturing a scientist, right? That movie showing and the discussion afterwards. Yeah, some of the scientists or mathematicians in the film also shared their story. That was really powerful story. And sometimes, those people who are in the higher power has, controls of the funding, have the connections and networks that is unfair, but it could, possibly just hurt one's career, right? So yeah, we need to have our voices heard. And then thank you so much for for sharing it. Oh, all right. So we continue with the strategies question. So let me see that question one more time. So what are the strategies for STEM female students to network and to be successful in their future careers? And what advice can you offer?
So I speak as someone who is not good at networking, right? But I have been really pleasantly surprised and gratified that almost every time I've reached out to a senior scientist, even just like an email out of the blue of, you don't know me, but can I ask you this question? Folks have been so very kind in responding and sharing their time and sharing their advice and setting up time for a follow-up phone conversation. And so I guess the one piece of advice I'd offer is just don't hesitate to ask, right? If you see someone who's doing something that you think you want to do, or at least find out more about, ask them, right? People tend to like to talk about their work and encourage other people in it. And so you have nothing to lose and often a whole lot to gain from that.
I got a master's degree in math, and then I left the program and went to a different school for my PhD, which isn't necessarily common. A lot of times people start at a program and go all the way through and get their PhD in math. But one of the reasons I decided to make the switch is because I had an advisor in my master's degree program who didn't like to introduce me to people. He was very painfully shy, and he and I worked together, but then he didn't personally have his own network. His network was quite small. And he once had a scholar come visiting, and he was doing research with her while she was visiting. So he canceled meetings with me, just, to balance his time. And he didn't once think, oh, I should introduce Teena to this wonderful scholar who is visiting with me. And she's amazing. I've gotten to know her separate from that event. But at that point I said, I really personally, a very outgoing person. I like to meet people. So I started working with a mentor who liked to introduce me to people, and he liked to travel. And he and I ended up doing a year of my PhD program by correspondence because he was traveling. He was actually at Microsoft in their theory group for a year. But he agreed that he and I would meet up every month that he was away. So he would fly me to him, or he would come home, or he would fly both of us to a conference. So I got to travel a lot, and everywhere we went, he would introduce me to people. So I think finding mentors that match your kind of STEM interests, as well as kind of your personality type, I think that's important. He jokes now that I know more mathematicians than he does, so it might actually be true. But I think that just getting to go to conferences and getting to talk to people, I think it's a good way to meet people. And I think having mentors that are able to introduce you to their community is helpful as well.
Yeah, I was going to say conferences are a really great opportunity, both for me as a professional artist as well. I have very niche conferences that are very directed in terms of specific arts that you can go to, but also I think about the content management system that we use for our website here at the college. We have a conference every year with that, and so I'm able to connect with other professionals that are doing the similar thing at a different college or a different university, and connecting with them, like Dr. Carroll said, and seeing how they approach a situation, or like Dr. Fleet says, I could email any of those other people and say, hey, remember that one thing that you did on your website that you showed us? How did you do that? And that's where we come together at that conference. For us, that particular conference is a smaller conference of professionals. So you're able to connect with one another year after year specifically. But like I said, you can connect over, that was a really cool design element that you did on that one website, and that looked really cool. And then they are gung-ho about sharing, well, we did it this way, and this is what you can do, and this is what you can do here. And I think that also gets me, for me personally, gets me really excited to come back and try new design elements, to try new things too. So to see what some other particular school might be doing something that's successful and saying, oh, cool, I want to take that and I want to do this to it now, and then and turning it and spinning it and having a whole new perspective on it. But then, like I said, having that network of people that you can just kind of lean back on and say, hey, this sucks, or hey, this is really cool, like let's connect over that is really good. So conferences and networks are really good there.
I want to say, don't be afraid to talk about the science that you're interested in non-scientific settings. The person that I do a chemistry podcast with is a professor up at Virginia Tech, and I met her at an old-time music party where we both found out that we were both really into green chemistry, and thus began a great collaboration. But lots of people have multiple interests, and you are not the only one who is interested in these two niche things, or you might find a new interest, but don't be afraid to talk about science outside of science settings. We need more people talking all kinds of science outside of science settings.
Speaking of science, there are currently a pair of red foxes fighting in my backyard. So kind of a cool biology. They sound like demented dogs. I don't know if you can hear them.
Oh, I want pictures.
Kind of dark out.
Maggie, you want to mention, talk a little bit more about our afternoon event with the Tech Girls group, the YMCA event?
Yes. So we had a fantastic opportunity earlier today. There's an organization, and you probably have heard of the YWCA, so not the YMCA. Cue the music. No, I'm kidding. The YWCA, that's in Bristol. And they have a special program that's a STEM after school program for girls, and it's called Tech Girls. I can actually put a link in maybe later into the chat so that you can learn a little bit more if you want. But these are girls from ages from grades 4 through 8. Although we did have somebody today who was 3rd grade, but typically grades 4 through 8 who come after school to the YWCA, and they do different kinds of programming. But one of the elements of it, the main element, is STEM. And we've had an opportunity to do multiple kinds of projects with this group in the past, and it's been a wonderful experience every time. It's definitely something that if students are interested in kind of youth mentoring and want to talk with girls, it's typically they like to have other girls, other women work with the girls. And this is kind of funny, but girls that age sometimes get a little googly over the college boys. So, to kind of keep them focused during their time together, and they typically have females come. But today we had the opportunity, though, to have Elizabeth on our panel, and Hannah and Rachael all attended, and we spoke with these girls a little bit about what's it like to be in college, and what's it like to work for a college, and be interested in STEM or in STEAM, as Rachael said, and just talk with them and hear some of their thoughts and some of their interests. So they asked us some questions, and Elizabeth said a little bit. I don't know if Hannah or Rachael want to chime in at all, and or Elizabeth, if you still have a little more to say, of course, but what that was like and what you thought about that experience.
Yeah, I thought that it was a really great experience. kind of like Elizabeth was talking about earlier, they were asking some like really good questions. And it sounds like that program is just really great and like getting them interested and just having like those conversations that we had today, just about, like what they might be interested in later on and what got us interested. And just having those conversations, I think, is helpful for like generations to come. Like just having those conversations to spark that interest.
And just to add a little bit to that, one of the questions that we thought about was, why do you believe equal access in STEM education is important for girls and women? But also, we could even branch out a little bit and say, why is it important to Appalachia? And specific, and yeah, and have that be part of the conversation too. So, any thoughts on that?
I think that the access to high quality mathematics education is really a issue of social justice. And it's something that I see in Appalachia isn't always available to students as they come up through their K-12 education. And I think that anytime a community shuts people out, it loses perspectives, it loses an opportunity for that person to make a contribution. So I think that math is very important, because if you don't have good math skills, it starts closing doors. So it's hard to get into chemistry. It's hard to see if biology is your passion, if you know that you have to take calculus, and that road seems insurmountable. So I think that that representation is really necessary. And I think that the more people who have strong math and science backgrounds, they just have more opportunities. I think that that's important.
I would say too, right? A lot of STEM work is asking questions about how the world works around you and solving problems. And I think the questions we ask and the problems we recognize to solve come very much from our experience. And so the more that we have representation in STEM fields from people from Appalachia, from a diverse range of backgrounds, right? The more we recognize what are the problems, what are the things that we want to know, right? There's a rich biodiversity in this region that maybe you wouldn't know about if you hadn't grown up here, right? To know, to want to find out about those species and protect them, right? And so the more we have representation in STEM fields from people from diverse backgrounds and diverse geographic regions, the more we have people asking those questions and trying to solve those problems that maybe we wouldn't otherwise.
I also think there's a lot of comfort in knowledge and understanding why, exactly like Dr. Fleet was saying, why the world works the way it does. And just being on, maybe I'm thinking more medicine, but things, maybe this hurts because so and so, maybe I don't feel so good today because so. Yeah, I think here's a story. When I was a senior in high school, and I told this to a couple of my friends today that I think are here, so sorry you're hearing it again. But when I was a senior in high school, they brought a bunch of us in to show off the STEM lab. They were very, very proud of it. And we get there and we go in, and it's a classroom, and that's it. It's a classroom. And in the middle of the classroom is an incubator with chickens in it. And that was the STEM lab. And that was an attempt, a step forward in the future. But obviously that shows just how kind of left out of opportunities, like Dr. Carroll was saying, that Appalachia is, I think.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I think we have some questions from the chat and some sent through private chat, so we're gonna get to those quickly. So first question here is addressed to Elizabeth. So the students really want to double major in psychology and biology, and students is afraid that she might not get all the classes done or completed in 4 years. So any insights or advice?
Okay, the one reason I may not be the best at answering this question because I did a lot of gen eds in high school through the community college. So I came in with most of that done and then got to really focus on the psychology and biology part. So I got really lucky there. And I don't want to say like, absolutely, you have enough time if maybe you didn't get to complete those gen eds, because I think that's kind of where the problems come in when it comes with double majoring, is getting the like Englishes and things out of the way. I definitely talked to Dr. Gaia about psychology, and then maybe somebody like Dr. A or Dr. Fleet about the biology part. I'm sure it's possible because I know of others that have done it who also had to do the gen eds here. So I think that's awesome that you want to do that.
Dr. Fleet, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think Elizabeth's answer is right on point. So I would second what she said. We see students doing all kinds of really interesting combinations of double majors. So I think the earlier you start that conversation with professors in whatever combination of departments, the easier it is to plan, right? So definitely talk to professors in psychology and biology, especially now because we're getting ready to do advising for fall course selection. This is perfect time to have those conversations and just get a sense of what it looks like, right? And then you can decide you know, if that picture looks like it makes sense for you.
Awesome. Another question. So the student has this question, and it's open for all panelists and student representatives on the call today. So the question is there a way to make the STEM programs at Emory more inclusive and or welcoming to women of all backgrounds?
I think that again comes to the topic of representation and seeing people like you doing the things that you want to do. And I think, and this could be a this could be an incorrect answer just based on my my rose colored glasses, I guess. But in my friend group thinking, just in the biology program, is relatively diverse of different backgrounds. And I think that being able, like we're having this panel discussion right now, being able to talk to those individuals and see, oh, they do that, they do what I love. I think that is a very good step in the right direction.
Oh, Dr. Carroll, you want to chime in for the previous question?
Well, I was just thinking that we would really like this to be a very welcoming space. I see Sharon's question in chat. Sharon asks, what are each of us doing to reach out to other students to introduce all to STEM? The panel is largely white. And that is a really good point. I would like all students to feel comfortable in STEM classes, and there are barriers as well, not just for women. If you look at the statistics for people of color getting math PhDs, it's very low. I know that our department has tried very hard to hire people of color. We've offered jobs to several, and it's hard to pull them into this community. We had one candidate tell us that he'd have to drive an hour and a half to get to a mosque, and that was too big a commitment for him, and that was something very difficult. So I don't want to lean on kind of the remoteness or the ruralness to be an explanation, but I think that we do have some work to do to make sure that everyone feels welcome.
To Reverend Bauer's question, I feel like I still have a lot to learn. I think it's a really important thing. I agree with Dr. Carroll. We absolutely want STEM departments to be inclusive and welcoming, and I'm still learning what that looks like and how to do that well. I think one piece I'm trying to be conscious of is just kind of making a point to talk to individual students, even if it's just a quick minute before or after class, right? To try to make one-on-one connections and help folks feel welcomed. But I certainly have more to learn, and I would welcome ideas about how to do that well.
I want to say here that I really appreciate Dr. Fleet's involvement actually with the Appalachian Center and using some civic work within her class, within some of her courses. I don't think that this is by any means necessarily answers the whole question, but I do think that giving students an opportunity to know the community that they're in and to see diversity out in the community and to be in different situations. So Dr. Fleet is one who has made an effort to send her students out to different organizations in some of her classes. And so I think sometimes opening up students' eyes to our area and our region can then be encouraging to then recruit more students into programs, because sometimes they just feel like they're in their Emory bubble and don't know really kind of what's surrounding them. And so understanding other people that are in our region and in our community, I think is important to start building more bridges and connections that can encourage more diversity.
And I want to chime in and confirming that all our faculty in different subject areas, including STEM, are trying very hard and spare no effort in making our classrooms, our learning environments more inclusive, more equitable, and affordable for audiences and students from all backgrounds. So we are very lucky to have you all here with us, and so just know that we are trying our best and to enhance our interaction, like Maggie said, interaction in the classrooms, outside classrooms, within the community, etc. And yeah, join us in this movement. Do we have another question? Maggie, I think it's probably time for us to say goodbye.
I did have one more question, one final question.
Okay.
I would just like to hear what is your favorite part of the work that you do, and the field that you're studying in as students? What inspires you and gets you going?
Discovery.
I would say, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see that I'd muted. But when you discover something new, when something doesn't behave like it's supposed to, and then you actually can figure out what's going on, from some peaks on a spectrum or something, it's pretty cool. Discovering something that nobody else has discovered before.
Yeah, and I guess similarly, I was going to say curiosity and learning, like lifelong learning. I feel like that's a buzzword that gets used a lot, but it's true. I'm always curious to learn new things. So I constantly find myself trying to learn something, and then maybe it doesn't even apply to my job, but in my own personal work, bringing that in, because I think that then can recharge me for the work that I actually do. And I shared earlier when we were in that Tech Girls panel, I tried to make a connection with some younger generation, and I feel like I'm still young, but not really. I play a lot of video games. So in that sense, mixing both my artistic design principles and kind of like the digital media work that I do, and combining them and working to build a video game. So that's one aspect that I get really excited about, is learning new things. So that's one of the new things that I'm learning.
I've started getting really interested in learning theory. Like, how do we learn the things we learn, and how do we keep them? You know, like a lot of math retention, people learn something for a test and then just, you know, it disappears. So how do we reinforce those ideas? So I'm actually learning a lot more psychology than I ever have before, and it's fascinating. I took a learning how to learn course with my middle school daughter, and it was really fun to see it from her perspective too. So that's something that interests me lately. How can I talk to students differently that helps them kind of smash some of their barriers? So that's been a fun direction for me to learn in.
For me, the things that my colleagues have said, discovery and curiosity and learning, all the things, but I think also being part of a community of learners, right? Having other people asking great questions, kind of challenging me to think more and revisit my ideas is a fun bit as well.
Hannah and Elizabeth, what inspires you?
I'm always afraid of, as soon as I turn my mic on, someone else will start to talk. But I want to help people. I know that's cliche, but we live in a universe where chaos is constantly increasing, and I want to do anything in my power to alleviate, I mean, not like universal chaos, but just the individual chaos within person to person. I think science is one of the best ways to do that. It's one of our most valuable tools, and I want to take advantage of that.
And then for me, it's kind of the same as everyone else was saying, just like learning more. Like we have some great math classes here, but like that's almost just the tip of the iceberg of the math world. Like there's so many different like fields and ideas and everything, and like there's so much just in math that like I can't imagine how much is in like biology, chemistry, like all these other like STEM fields. So it's just like amazing how much knowledge there is in the world. So I think that's really cool.
And I will say that what inspires me is community. And so I'm really grateful that even in this time that we're doing all this Zooming, that we have Zoom, that we have the opportunity to do this. So we can thank a lot of tech people for that. And hopefully a lot of women were involved in that too. So I just thank you all for being part of the community, for coming tonight and giving your time to to listen to these wonderful panelists and with us, and thank you for just sharing that with us, all of you.
I want to say that one thing that inspires me, like Maggie said, actually I concur, is really the people, right? We are trying to make a difference. We are getting connected and inspire each other, and with interesting topics, and those powerful stories shared. I'm feeling very grateful to be here with you all. And then thank you so much again for sharing your stories and your experiences and insights with us. Special thanks to our panelists and student representatives and my co-sponsor, co-organizer, Maggie, as well as our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Carly, Sherry, and John.
Yes, thank you all so much. This panel was wonderful.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, for joining us. Take care.